Okay. Go ahead.
So I've been a CSUN journalism professor teaching broadcast and digital journalism classes since 2013. Back to you. No, so I first got into radio actually in community college. You know, I went to community college out of high school in 1994. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Was going to transfer to Cal State Fullerton as a business major because I had worked in an office, a couple of offices by that point, part-time jobs during college, and I enjoyed it, honestly. I kind of enjoyed that atmosphere, but just something wasn't clicking with business. And I think most people in journalism will tell you that the business side of things, the math side of things, I always thought I was good at math until you put me into a microeconomics course or a managerial accounting course, and oh gosh, no, too many numbers, too many spreadsheets, too many equations that I just, no, thank you. So I, instead of going to Cal State Fullerton, I stayed at Mount Sac and thought, okay, well, what actually would be fun? What would be an interesting course of study, if you will? And my mom and I literally sat there with the college catalog in the kitchen and said, radio sounds fun. So I went into the radio classes, had a blast. I mean, I basically fell in love with radio, fell in love with the medium. And I would say, so that was 1997 that I started that. By 98, I was already told by one of the other professors here at Cal State Northridge, who was my professor at Mount Sac, Tammy Trujillo. She said, you know what, they win awards at CSUN. You should totally go there. And I didn't even hesitate. I just applied. I got in. It was great. Had a great time at CSUN. Was covering stories all throughout Southern California as a field reporter for KCSN. We were in the dorms at the time. It was a great little setup. It was like a little SWAT team of students putting news together on a daily basis. It was a great time. And the last semester that I was at CSUN, going into spring break, I started calling knowing I wanted to get into radio. TV was not really my bag. Calling every news or talk radio station in California, Nevada, and Arizona, looking for an interview that I could go on during spring break, thinking that I'm just going to travel around the state on a road trip, going to all these interviews. Oh, it's going to be great. I'll have like 2 interviews this day. I'll have like 3 interviews that day. Of the 50 or so I called, 3 people called back. One was in Fresno, another was in Chico, and the third was in Santa Rosa. And they all said, yeah, come on up. We don't have anything for you, but yeah, sure, come on up. And so I interviewed in Fresno. Let's say it was on a Tuesday. I don't remember if it was actually on a Tuesday, but we'll say it's on a Tuesday of spring break. And that conversation lasted long enough for him to have nearly a whole pack of cigarettes on the back porch of the radio station. And he said, after it, he said, you know what? I know you've got 2 more interviews, but if you're willing to be our morning editor, I know you want to be on the air, but there's a lot of turnover here. We're a small market station. I know you want to be on the air. Stay long enough and you will be. And he said, okay, I know you've got 2 more interviews, but go to those. When you're done, call me back and I'll offer you a job. And so I did. I drove to Chico the next day, drove over to Santa Rosa the after that, and then I pulled over and used a payphone. We all know what that is, right? We've seen those in museums. Mm-hmm. Used a payphone, and I called him back and I said, is that job offer still available? He's like, absolutely. And I was about 3 hours away from the radio station, and I said, I could be there this afternoon. He's like, don't kill yourself, dude. Just come tomorrow morning. You're fine. So I got that job. I stayed for 3 years, an amazing experience. And he was right. I was on the air within weeks because people had left. I was waking up at 2 a.m. Yes. And I went through 9/11 while we were there. Went through the shuttle explosion while we were there, that happened to be, the commander happened to be a Fresno State graduate. So some interesting stories to cover. And while there, about 2 years in, I um, started sending out my CDs stamped with different places, like different little reminders of wherever I was applying for. So all the Florida jobs that I was applying for, I would put oranges on the CD labels, and or snowflakes for the Rhode Island station that never called me back. But Miami called and was like, "Hey, A, stop sending us CDs, and B, you sound good. Let's talk." And so we had a phone interview for, I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes. And they said, when can you start? So I actually moved out to Miami, sight unseen. They put me up in a hotel for a week. During that time, needed to find an apartment and all this stuff. It was hot as all kinds of get out. And while there, I covered hurricanes, presidential debates, wildfires. It was an amazing experience. And it was part of iHeartMedia, still is. But while there, I was heard by our iHeart station out here in LA, KFI, one of the stations I grew up listening to. And the news director there was like, "Hey, I've heard your stuff on our news network. Send me a demo." I did. He's like, "Well, you're not ready, but call me when you are, or keep sending me stuff and let's see what happens." So I started doing news that I felt like would be relevant to KFI, not necessarily Los Angeles news, because I'm still in Miami. I've got to do that stuff, but in KFI style. Our stories at KFI or stories at WIOD in Miami were 45 seconds or so. You could do 2 or 3 sound bites in 45 seconds. In LA, it was 2 to 3 sound bites in 30 seconds, a 30-second rap. So I started doing news in that style, and they finally said, "Okay, yeah, you're ready. Come on out." So I started as the Orange County reporter. Our evening show there got blown out, so they said, "We need you to anchor evenings, weeknights." And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So that led to an 11-year run as the weeknight anchor at KFI. It was a great time. Tim Conway Jr. show. We had a lot of fun. My gosh, it was just an amazing experience. Separated from the company in late 2019, and then while there, I started a podcast. While there, started a family. The podcast that I was doing at the time, I don't do anymore. I just started the Aron Bender podcast. I got really creative with the name, and it features same types of conversations, but much deeper conversations with media personalities about what they've gone through, struggles and successes, failures and firings, and hope and faith and perseverance. And it's been a really good experience. I also do news videos for PasadenaNow.com. I do the Santa Clarita Valley Signal News podcast, the Signal's first podcast, first news podcast that I started in November. And then I also teach. I don't know if you know that, but I've been teaching since 2013 after Professor Sally Turner, whom we all know. I was guest speaking for her class, and in 2013 there was an enrollment explosion at Cal State's, and I think I was one of, I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen people that were hired. It felt like, by the journalism department at that time, and it's been a great ride. It's been a great ride. I'll see you guys later. Bye everybody. That's it. Oh, questions? Okay, fine.
Thank you for the great introduction. It was really great to just kind of get to know you and your journey as your way through radio, and just kind of elevating yourself and working on your craft. So something that I want to know, just because personally as a journalism major, I know you're saying TV really wasn't for you, but what are some of the significant differences that you see in radio compared to TV or broadcast?
So I really like the emphasis, and TV has gotten TV, especially local news, has gotten better actually at storytelling. But that's one of the reasons I really gravitated toward radio at the time, is that you could just tell stories and paint pictures with your words rather than relying on pictures, and just because many times you can watch news on mute and still get the same story with no captions or anything like that. Oh, okay, somebody died. Oh, okay, somebody was arrested. Oh, okay. And it's unfortunate that that much of the news is like that, but and like I said, there has been a resurgence in recent years. I know you had a guest last week, Jonathan Gonzalez from NBC4 here in LA. He is an amazing storyteller, and he worked a lot on that in Bakersfield and in Denver before getting to LA, and just having the time and being given the time to tell stories. Because, if you're talking about going viral, the stories that go viral are the stories that people want to hear told. And TV, at the time especially, was not really into storytelling. Local news didn't have an emphasis on storytelling. It was churn and burn. If it bleeds, it leads. All kinds of cliches like that. And it was unfortunate. Plus, I really liked the immediacy of radio. If there's a story happening right now, if I call a radio station, I can be on the air in seconds. I just flip a switch and I'm on the air. If I call a TV station, now it's a little bit different with Zoom and those capabilities, but by and large, they're going to send out at least a photographer to try to interview me. They're going to maybe send a reporter to try to interview me. And it just takes a long time to get news on the air in general. There are apps that are now available that allow TV reporters to go live with studio quality or higher quality equipment or a higher quality image. But in general, it just takes longer for a TV news story to go on the air. Radio, I just love the immediacy of it. And I grew up listening to Vin Scully call Dodger games on the radio. I grew up with the car on when I would be driving around with my dad as he was doing work or whatever. And I loved radio and I loved that medium. And just over time, it's just confirmed to me that this is one of the reasons I got into podcasting was I could just use that audio medium to just stretch my legs, just let that breathe. Some of my podcasts are an hour. I'm not Joe Rogan here with 3.5 hour long podcast episodes. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I don't know how that guy does it. I think he just works out just so he has the endurance to last through his entire podcast. But I just love the audio medium. I love mixing audio, finding the right music and song or clip to play at just the right time during an interview or a live radio show. And it's the live aspect of it, just the intimacy of it, being able to connect with listeners through the radio in a way that TV, it's missing. I think honestly, and I'll wrap it up here because I'm babbling now, but I think with TV, you take away the imagination that radio lets flourish. You quote that. That was a good quote. I'm going to write that down. Sophia has a question in the chat. Do you want me to throw it out there?
Yes, please.
All right. With radio, did you always have that voice or did you practice until you found your voice? So I'm going to take that two different angles. First off, my physical voice. I remember distinctly in the summer before my 9th grade year. I don't know if they still do trips to D.C. or New York as a middle to high schooler, but there was an organization that would do student trips, and between 8th and 9th grade, the option was New York or D.C., and I chose New York, and I had several days. My crush was on that trip. And I was like, for days trying to get up the nerves to talk to her. And once I finally did, it was the day that my voice changed. So I was talking like this. Beth, would you like to go out with me when we go back home? And she said no, just FYI. But the physical voice has just been there. Now, there is an aspect, and I'll transition from the physical voice to finding your figurative voice, there is an aspect of performing in the media, in the news media, on a talk show or something like that. I sound different at whatever time it is, 5:44 p.m. than I would at 5:44 a.m. You know, it takes there's an aspect of performing that, you know, my voice is going to sound different at A, different parts of the day, B, who I'm talking to, C, if I'm doing a TV news video, or if I'm doing radio, or if I'm doing podcast. Am I anchoring the news? Because I'm probably going to sound a little bit more like this, because I want to project energy, and I want to project urgency. Whereas a podcast, I might talk a little bit like this, and I might talk, "Hi, welcome everybody to the Aron Bender podcast. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about all kinds of crappy stuff sometimes and good stuff. So I'm going to try to find a tone that worked for both." You know, so there's a different aspect of it when you're talking about your physical, literal voice, and as opposed to your figurative voice, which is the first 4 or 5 years that I was in radio, I talked like a robot. I did the news like a robot, because the people that I listened to on the air talked like robots. They had very little inflection in their voices, and there was very little personality, because at the time, radio and media in general was not personality driven, it was content driven. You know, say what you will about Rush Limbaugh. I'm not going to talk about his politics or anything like that. But in the 80s into the 90s, he developed the talk show format that is most widely used today, which is host-driven, personality-driven. Prior to him and somebody like Jim Rome on the sports talk radio side of things, you would have talk shows where they would put out a topic, they would talk about it for a little bit, and then they would take calls for the rest of the hour. And then when that hour was done, they would switch to a new topic, and then they'd take more calls on that. So it was very caller-driven. And by the time I got there into news radio in the early 2000s, it had started to become personality-driven. So my news director in Miami was like, "I didn't hire this robot. Who is this? Who's this guy?" "I do the news. My name is Aron. The weather will be sunny today. Back to you." Nobody talks like that. So it started to transition, and my voice, not physical voice, but my figurative voice, the way I sounded on the air, in terms of the style I was speaking, needed to change. It needed to evolve, and it needed to become my personality reading the news. My personality, not reading the news necessarily, but telling people what the news is. Because it's not, you know, you don't want to necessarily focus on reading the news, but you want to tell people stories. Like, hey, this is what happened. And that's how you generally want to sound on the air is, you know, Sophia's personality presenting the news. You know, I don't want Sophia to sound like Savannah sounds like Lupita or Jesse. Gina's going to have a style all her own, you know? And it used to be that you could kind of pigeonhole it like, oh, she's totally NPR style, where she just talks like this, and she talks about recipes and how in the Amazon they trudge through the rainforest. Or you could talk like this, or you were a high energy anchor, and that's all you could do. No, it's just now it's very personality driven, and finding your voice. I felt like I probably didn't actually find my voice figuratively for maybe 10 or maybe 12 years of doing news, because it took about 4 or 5 years for somebody to tell me that I sounded like a robot. And then it took probably another 4 or 5 years for me to get rid of that robot, like really get rid of that robot, and then start to incorporate my own personality in the news. And it also helps if you're in a newsroom that allows for that encourages that.
And so kind of like going off of that, and Jesse, I'm going to get to your question next. I'm assuming that news directors kind of know that we're going to sound a little robot-y when we're coming out of college, correct?
Yeah, maybe not robot-y, because no, and I say that because that certainly is a possibility, but they're going to know, your first news director or your first manager is going to know that you probably aren't as confident as you will be 10 years down the road. And so that's what a lot of news directors end up working with is the confidence level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the confidence level that you would need to project your voice, but also the confidence level you will need to develop your voice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not going to have, and it's also a function, I think, of your education.
Yeah.
Because, you know, here at CSUN we have, and I'm not here to be like, oh, totally, we got the best program around. We totally do. But there are, you do more at CSUN than a lot of other schools.
Yeah.
Like there aren't many, there aren't that many, really. There aren't that many broadcast journalism programs in the country that have their own TV station, that have their own radio station, that have students on those radio stations. You go to KPCC, you go to Pasadena City College, that is a, it's, you know, PCC, right? But there aren't students on the air. You go to KUSC, and that's a classical station where students really aren't on the air. And that's just the radio side of things.
Yeah.
So I think news directors are used to students not having that much confidence when they come in, and it's their job to build that confidence. And to, like, if your first job, you're not going to, in your first week, be given a 10-part investigative series to do, you know? So it's up to news directors also to kind of nurture those new reporters, to give them the confidence, while also trying to find that balance between, like, throwing them into the fire and saying, okay, just go learn and go do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made any sense at all.
No,
I'm just
no,
rambling and babbling by that point. Cut this out. Who's ever recording this, cut it out.
No, that made a ton of sense. But Jesse, do you kind of want to ask your question as well?
Yeah, you actually transitioned perfectly into my, I actually have two questions.
Oh, yes.
So my first one has to do with, you know, finding your voice. You were talking about, you know, you had the challenge of, you know, transitioning from more of a robotic voice to a more natural, you know, yourself voice. I launched my own podcast a couple months ago, and I've been editing a couple episodes over the last couple weeks, and I'm finding that I'm maybe too much myself. For a podcast, would you say that it's a little bit different than, you know, broadcast journalism, or would you say that these days that everywhere is kind of like encouraging the more yourself type thing, or would I have to find a balance?
No,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think one of the gifts of podcasting is that it is a space where you can be yourself. You do have to find your lane. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
You don't necessarily, if you have, like, if we'll take your interest, you have a gaming podcast, I would imagine, maybe, or something like that, right?
Partially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually.
so a lot of the advice I give for podcasters is to try to find a focus. You know, like on my podcast, I love interviewing people. I love conversations with people. And so I try to focus on those conversations. But what I learned is that I need to include more of myself in those conversations. And it's not just a one-way interview, you know, where it's like, it becomes a conversation. So if it's just a podcast by yourself, for example, each episode should have a focus, but it should still always be who you are, because podcasting and YouTube channels and Twitch not to a certain degree, but those spaces, IG Live, Facebook Live, those spaces are, what's cool about those is those are carved out so you can be yourself. You know, like some of the more popular personalities here in town on TV, they get so many viewers when they go live on Facebook or IG or Twitch or whatever it is, because viewers are clamoring to see that person as they really are, not performing while doing the weather, not performing while, you know, doing the news at the anchor desk or sports or whatever, but just who they are, like just normal everyday stuff. Like former Fox 11 entertainment reporter Julie Chang has a wildly popular Instagram page because she shows her life, you know, and so getting back to your question about the idea of being yourself, like podcasting, any content that is your own brand should be yourself, should be you, because if you start performing, if you will, if you start performing on your own stuff, then you lose you. You know,
that makes sense.
People go to Jesse's podcast for Jesse. If they wanted you performing, then they could go to, you know, Complex TV or Revolt or wherever you end up, you know?
Yeah.
If they wanted to see you perform and interview and do whatever it is you're doing. But if they want your thoughts and everything like that, then they're going to go to your podcast. They're going to go to your YouTube or your Twitch. Now, I say that with the caveat that you also need to decide how much of yourself are you going to give people. Because there's something to be said for like holding some of your life back, like just for a certain amount of privacy, or just so that you don't become consumed or identified as just that. Like I'm a husband and father, you know. I'm not a podcaster first. I'm not, you know, a news guy first or whatever. So you kind of have to find that balance between, okay, how much are you going to give? You know, you should give your authentic self.
Yeah.
Because then you never lose yourself, right? Then then there's never any question like, hey, what did I tell these people last week? Oh, okay, let me go back to my script. That's right. You want to be your authentic self, but you also want to find balance to where you aren't you don't identify as your career. You don't identify as, you know, whoever that performance is, or whoever that performer, or the persona, I should say, is the word I'm looking for, the persona. Like, are you Jesse or are you Jesse the podcaster?
Gotcha.
You know, again, rambling, man, rambling.
I mean, that's the podcast in you, like,
right, Ed, seriously. Yeah.
It's all good info, so don't worry about it.
I'm just going to lean over and delete all of this, right?
I mean, that actually transitions into my next question.
Hey, now, I love transitioning into other questions. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, do you find yourself these days or ever just going off script, or do you have a script? How do you plan what you're going to say in an episode, and how do you try to stick to it, especially when whoever you're interviewing, you know, can actually just go off and do whatever they want too?
Yeah, for sure. So if we go back to doing news, because that's what I did for the majority of my career. Let's say a regular shift, I would start on the air at 6, and I'd go until 11. Okay, every half hour, and with longer newscasts. And I see some questions in the chat, or some things that I'll touch on after this. But what I would do is, for the hour before I actually went on the air, I'd go through the entire story library, because as the evening guy, I'm the last person to read most of these stories. And I rewrite everything in my voice. I rewrite everything how I'm going to say it. That serves two purposes. First off, when I get to it, it's already in my voice. And secondly, when I get to it, I don't necessarily always need the script, because I can then just tell the story, because I've read it already, I've rewritten it already, and I can retell that story and I can throw in slang if I want to, depending on the newsroom, depending on the actual story, and to where, because that's how I talk. That's that's the fun I have. That's my personality coming out. So that's number one when it comes to news. You want to know your news so that you aren't necessarily reading off a script, but you're just telling a story. For the podcast, I do as much research as I can. As a father of two daughters running around doing school on Zoom, I can't always research for hours and hours and hours before I talk to a guest. But I try to do enough that I can carry 3 or 4 or 5 questions. I don't generally write them down because I don't want to be stuck with those questions. I don't want to feel like I'm checking off boxes like, okay, I've asked number 3. Okay, we're going to move to number 4 now. This is my question. But I feel like I've at least done enough research on them to know where I can go if I get stuck. And the reason I say if I get stuck, because I'm just listening to them, and I generally never get to that exact question that I had in my head beforehand, because all I was doing was listening to their answer and going off something they said. Going off like, oh, that's interesting you mentioned that. Why do you think you were that way? Why do you think you're so self-deprecating? Like I talked with Beto Duran today. He's a LA TV and radio sports freelancer. He does a lot of stuff around LA with boxing and sports commentary and everything. And yeah, we've talked before, so it's more of a conversation. But we got into today how he's self-deprecating. Like his entire Instagram is just him making fun of himself. He reposts pictures his friends sent him of when he's on TV. They take video of it with Snapchat filters, so his mouth is just the entire size of his face, and he'll repost that. I'm like, where do you think that comes from? He's like, it's just my buddies and I, we crack on each other all the time, and why am I going to put out something on Instagram that's not me? That it's just my Instagram is an extension of me, and so that carried like 5 to 10 minutes of the podcast. Just that one question where I asked him, why do you think you're so self-deprecating by posting all these, pictures on Instagram where you don't look good? Where did that come from? And that was 5 to 10 minutes. And what he said during those 5 to 10 minutes, I took little notes, like 2 or 3 things that he said. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to come back to that. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to come back to that. And that is a style that that's a skill I actually had to develop over time, because I always thought I was too arrogant to think that I didn't need notes. I was like, oh, I'll totally remember that. I'll totally remember that. Dude, your memory sucks. Write that shit down. Pardon my language. Bleep that out in post-production. But I started taking notes like, oh, I should totally, I should ask him about the beer that he helped develop, So I just write down the name of the beer. Or I'll be like, okay, Latino playing golf, what is that like? And so we talked about that. And I probably asked him maybe like in an hour 10, I probably asked him like 7 things, because the rest of it was just, and everything was just listening to something he said before. But if you get stuck, you got to have a backup. You got to have like, oh, okay, if I don't know what else to ask based on something he said or whatever, then I'll have a go-to, That said, that's the conversation part. The intro and the outro, I write out, because I've got usernames in there. I've got social media links. I've got, for the podcast, for example, I just started the Aron Bender podcast. I launched my first 3 episodes 2 weeks ago, and I wanted in each of those 3 episodes to kind of catch people up with my life, because for many people it had been a year or year and a half since they had heard me on the radio or heard me in a podcast. So I wanted to catch them up, and I didn't want to forget anything. So I took about 20 to 30 minutes to write about 30 or 45 seconds of an intro. because I didn't want to mess any of that up. But I know people who just crack open the mic, like Beto, who I talked to today. He just cracks open the mic and he's like, "Hey, it's the Living the Dream podcast. I haven't been here for a minute," and he just goes off and he just, he does 20 minutes by himself. I can't do that. Yeah, I'm not. I nobody wants to hear 20 minutes from me. A, and B, I don't want to hear 20 minutes from me.
Hey, we want to hear 20 minutes from you.
Oh,
That's
God.
That's why you're on here today.
Very
Right.
true,
We've heard
exactly.
20
More than
minutes.
20 minutes,
Yeah,
actually.
I've actually, I think I spent 20 minutes on that first bio before we got bombed. So let me go through the chat here. So Savannah says that you sound more confident, when you do KCSN work, for example, than video packages. And I think when you do KCSN, are you talking about anchoring, when you were anchoring?
That, or like, for example, when you had our assignments for like our October monthly story,
Right.
for example, I did one that was like, it was about blazing burgers during COVID. And
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of bad, but I guess Tammy liked it. And then I kind of like sat there and listened to it and I was like, I sound really confident in this. And then I listened to my packages and I don't sound that confident and I don't know why.
And I think, I think it just, I don't want to bag on TV because that's not why I'm here. But I think, again, there's just something about radio, and it's simple. It's just you and a microphone. It's just you and a microphone. And yeah, when you get into the KCSN news booth or the studio and you're anchoring, there's a lot going on. You've got an audio board to worry about and sound to play and things like that. And some of the confidence that you feel or hear might also be adrenaline that you don't get when you're just voice tracking a package for TV. So I think there's some of that also. And, but that, I think if TV is something you do want to do, the confidence that you feel like you have in radio might just take a little bit more time with TV, because there are so many other layers to worry about, because you've got to time that voice track to the pictures, and then does it all make sense? Okay, for Davis's class, do I have the 12 shots I need? All those different things. Whereas with radio, it's like I've gathered that audio. I need only 2 or 3 sound bites. Let's just rock it out, and I just write. So that was for me. And we go back to what Andre was asking about earlier, the idea of the differences or why I gravitated toward radio. And I think that was it too. I think it was just, it relied more on writing than it did on writing words to pictures. Yeah. And then you had your hand up again, Savannah? Yes, Savannah. Yes.
First of all, Davis's class is extremely stressful putting packages together, specifically how he asks. Because
Right.
I feel like it kind of takes away from the creativity a little bit. Don't tell him I said that. Cause
No, you know what? But that's the thing. I will defend him a little bit, because at that stage, you don't want creativity getting in the way of learning the basics and the foundation. You learn the basics and the foundation so that you can be more creative. Ooh, that was... Okay, you got to write this shit down, people. Write it down. There's going to be a quiz.
Taking notes. I'm writing it down right now.
Another thing I wanted to ask was, I just started writing for the Proclaimer, the Santa Clarita Valley Proclaimer.
Okay, cool.
I'm not like super into print. I still want to do broadcast, but I like both TV and radio. So I feel like I kind of want to do what Davis had us start doing in our blogs for his class, where we did like a SoundCloud audio piece that went with a video package and also went with our article. I've been kind of trying to bug my editor to see if he'll let me do that. Is that like, should I not do that, or is that a good idea?
I would just do it, because whatever you end up doing, if it doesn't go on the, Proclaimer, if it doesn't go on their website or their platform, it can always go on yours. Yeah. I mean, if are you getting paid for the writing that you're doing?
Yeah.
For them? Okay. So repurpose what you're doing for them for your own content, your own website, or your own Instagram. That's what's cool about media today is you don't even need to actually start your website. Like I have AronBender.com. It goes to the link tree where everything else lives. Like there's no, you don't need to worry about like starting your own website or your Wix or, your WordPress and all that stuff, So you could just, yeah, Jesse's like, it's the same for me. Yeah. So all you need is a way to get people to your content. And if you're more popular on IG than anything else, put your content on IG. Do we still call it IG? How about the gram? And if you're more popular on the gram than anything else, and you know what? We haven't even mentioned TikTok yet. Corvette. Let's do it.
I want to see your renegade.
I don't know what the renegade is. I really don't. But no, I just seriously, I actually thought about starting class this semester with some form of put your head on my shoulder, or you've not seen the put your head on my shoulder. Oh, that Sophia's got to go watch that trend. Be careful though; it's not safe.
Where they have like
sometimes.
the door frame and it's the red background.
I know, yeah. So I could put your head on my shoulder. Yeah. So, but either way, if you don't necessarily have to pick one platform, but you also don't necessarily need their platform. And if they don't want your stuff, produce it for yourself, because that's going to help you get a job. That's going to help you get more followers. That's going to help, get more of a following. Yeah. Let's see. Let me look through the chat here if anybody else has anything. Yeah, going live is hard. Is now you're talking about radio, Sophia, or TV?
Kind of both. Like just going live on even I feel like live on Instagram or like Facebook too. You're not necessarily showing your face if you're at like a protest. So it's kind of like you're on the radio where they're looking
right
at, and they can only hear your voice. But that really like trips me up. Like I freeze. Like I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. And I know everybody's like, describe what you see. And I'm like, well,
it's hard for me too.
Yeah.
It's hard for me too. I was not a very good live reporter. What we would call, oh gosh, I forgot the term for it, like a roser, which is a reporter on scene.
Oh, wow.
I was not good at those at all. I was not very good at describing what I would see. I remember there was a wildfire that started in Malibu. I want to say 07, might have been 08, but a church was on fire. And this was a wildfire, okay? So I'm driving to the wildfire on either Topanga Canyon or Malibu Canyon Highway. I can't remember which. But I had to wait for, like, the fire was already bad enough that I had to wait for a fire truck to move a live power line out of the road so that I could continue getting to where I needed to get to. And when I got to a church that was fully involved, I called the news station. I was like, I'm live here. And that was one of my worst reports ever. It just was not very good. I remember back in Fresno, we had a hot air balloon festival, and they said, go to the hot air balloon festival, call us when you're live, not just on the air, but in the air. And that was a rambling 4 or 5 minute live report that should have only been 30 seconds to a minute. It was awful. It was terrible. And I think a lot of it is just, I didn't practice it. When you're at home, just start describing shit. Just start like, all right, now Sophia is grabbing some milk out of the fridge, and it looks, now I'm not asking you to do like play by play, but just describe what you see. And also don't be ashamed of not being very good right now. I think that's part of the battle also that I had to face as well, is I was striving for perfection every time, and I was so afraid to fail that I didn't let myself succeed. because you can only grow if you push yourself and put yourself through uncomfortable situations. And I didn't like going live, so I did everything I could to not go live. And I would script things out. And my best live shots were the scripted ones, you know, instead of putting away the notebook and just describing what I would see. And
so terrifying to me though. Like I have tried to go live like multiple times, and
yep.
I mean, I know that it takes practice. And Jonathan Gonzalez even talked about like his first live shot that he did for broadcast, and he really screwed it up. Yeah. And I'm so scared that I'm going to, and I feel like it might happen. And I know it probably, I don't want to like knock on wood, but I don't know, like I'm just so scared, like how am I going to recover from that if it does happen? And
so the key to live shots is to just do them, get them over with, and you've done it. It's like a 30-second live shot, 45 seconds or whatever it is. That's the key, is to just do it and get it over with and move on to the next. And also, again, show yourself some grace. You know, there's no way, and this is, I mean, it's something I tell, I'm not comparing you or anybody else to my 8-year-old daughter, but this is a conversation that I just had with her this week as she's trying to learn 2-digit subtraction. The idea that there's no way that she could know how to do that because she's never done it before. So she just needs to keep doing the work and keep practicing however she wants to. She count on her fingers. I don't care. Use an online tutoring thing. I don't care. That's cool. However you can do it, but just practice and practice and practice, and you'll get better at it. You'll get better at it. You know, my first news story back in 1997 or 98, if I played that for you right now, if I had it, I would. Trust me. I sounded very robotic. I sounded very, timid. And I sounded like I thought somebody should sound on the radio, you know? And so there's just, especially these, it's interesting, you know, we call these classes like 395 and 415 and 445. They're skills classes because you need to just keep doing things. They're all hands-on because they are skills you need to learn that you can only learn by doing. And yeah, of course, going live is terrifying. Of course, because A, you've never done it. B, you don't want to screw it up, but who cares if you do? It's not the end of the world. Don't curse while you're there so that you don't, threaten the TV station's license. I screwed up when I was in Mount Sac. I screwed up big time because I went on the air. I wasn't happy with how management was running the station, so I went on the air and I said that, and I wasn't on that station anymore. And then you fast forward to 2008, maybe 2009. Now, whenever Senator Ted Kennedy died, maybe 2011 or 12. Most of you probably don't know the band, the Dead Kennedys. But, okay, so I went on the air at 10:30 with the headline, 10:30 at night, Ted Kennedy is a dead Kennedy. I'm Aron Bender, live in the KFI newsroom. I got a call from my program director by the end of my shift, said, need you to come in tomorrow morning. We need to talk, and it just, sometimes you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes yeah. I thought,
oh my God.
personally, I thought it was pretty good.
I think that's hilarious. But
yeah.
With a dark sense of humor.
But exactly. Here's the thing: is you got to kind of decide. Sometimes, like, okay, how much is too much? But until you cross the line, you don't know where the line is. So, but going live.
Family probably heard that. It was like.
Yeah, but going live, honestly, it's just It's just a skill that you need to learn through doing, learn through practicing. And I feel like I'm really good at live radio anchoring. I love doing that, but the first few times that I hosted talk shows, oh my God, I threw up before I went on the air. I'd been in radio for before I actually hosted talk shows, not news shows, because the best part about news shows is you're just there to introduce the news. You know, it's an hour-long news show, so I'm just going to introduce news. You don't have to actually talk for 8-minute segments. But like if people ask, like, I want to be a talk show host. This was before podcasting. I want to be a talk show host. How do I be a talk show host? I said, well, okay, go into your bathroom, okay, and just talk for 20 minutes about anything. See if you can talk for 20 minutes. No breaks, maybe a second or two here and there, but no breaks. And the more you do that, the better you'll get at it. I was never good at that. I was never very good at just talking for 20 minutes straight. We've had seasoned journalists come into the radio station thinking that they could do the job that they hear other people doing. And I had one person, I threw to them at the end of my news at like 6:05. They're supposed to take, or at 6:04, actually, 6:04 p.m. They're supposed to take it up to 6:12, 8 minutes. They ended the segment at 6:06 because they freaked out. They had a meltdown. They froze because going live is hard. And they'd never had to do it before. And so until you practice, until you just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Go on your IG Live. I don't know if you just do it right now for stories, but just do it like once a week. Just for the hell of it, and see what happens. And don't take a break from talking unless you're actually reading something. Just keep talking. Just keep practicing. Like Dory said, just keep swimming. Adobe Audition, any tips and tricks? Oh, wait, no. Sophia asked also, how do you get that perfect soundbite from someone when you're interviewing? Again, practice. You kind of ask questions that are in their wheelhouse, and that they have an answer for. Obviously there are many times when you're going to be talking with people who don't want to talk to you, and sometimes those are your sound bites. You asking the question. Always record yourself asking the question as well. You asking the question and then telling them no comment or this or that, and so the idea that you just keep practicing your interview and find out which questions work best for the stories you're doing, like podcasting. I love asking why. That is more often than not the question that I get the best answers from is why or how. Because the when and the where and the who I can usually get from Wikipedia. I can get from their bio. What I can't normally get is why. Like, I'm going to have a guest speaker in my classes later this semester. Her name is Ileana Capellan. She's a reporter who grew up in Orange County as a Dominicana Mexicana in Aliso Viejo, who didn't look like anybody else there. And yet she decided that for college, she's going to go to a small school in Tennessee. Because Orange County, she's not already different enough. She's like, oh, screw it, I'm going to Tennessee. And then a few years later, after college, she gets a job in Alabama. So my question to her is, why Tennessee? Like, why do you feel the need to push yourself out of your boundaries? Because obviously, you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Why? And why is one of the best questions to try to get a good soundbite from. Let's zoom through these. You struggle with Adobe Audition. Any tips and tricks?
You can skip over that. You can skip over that if you want. Yeah.
Okay, but I will say I love Adobe Audition. That's my bread and butter. I love it. And what I generally tell people is don't rely only on the mouse, but figure out some good keyboard shortcuts.
Okay.
Because now all of a sudden you're editing with two hands instead of one. And the faster you get at mouse and keyboard, the faster you're going to get with Adobe Audition. Radio is special. I love it. I love it. Jesse, what were you asking? So it gets tiring. It's more than one medium as well. What were you asking? Do you remember what that comment was about?
I think you were talking about, you were comparing TV broadcasting versus, just being on the radio.
Yeah.
And just editing at that point.
Oh, yeah. So here's the thing, though, Savannah, about you said Professor Bluestein, don't tell her about the website requirement. I will say this. Again, that's for your personal brand. Your personal brand doesn't necessarily need to be on a website. But while I was at KFI and at WIOD in Miami, I had to update the website. So I had to be familiar with, at least to a certain degree, HTML. At least to a certain degree, different user interfaces on how to update the website. So if you're at an advantage actually with her class requiring a website, because more often than not you're gonna wear a hat at some point. You're gonna wear the hat of webmaster at your station. Especially since, like, Sinclair, for example, over the last couple of weeks laid off like 400 to 500 people. So those people, they weren't all on the air. They were IT people, they were web people, they were digital people. So who's going to wear those hats now? Jesse says so many of our guests have stories with wildfires. I know, it's crazy. I only covered one wildfire in Florida. I covered more hurricanes than wildfires. More hurricanes in Florida than I did wildfires in LA. But my favorite wildfire story, I think in 2008, might have been 07, but I want to say it was 2008, there were 3 wildfires going on in Southern California at once, which is not all that unheard of now, but it was at the time. We had one in Malibu, one giant one in Orange County, and another one in San Diego. And we were so stretched thin that I covered the Malibu one on Friday, Orange County on Saturday, and San Diego on Sunday. And it was, the adrenaline, talk about the adrenaline rush of just going all these different places. And I still, to this day, think that I saw at a news conference the guy who started the Orange County one, but nobody ever believes me. Let's see, SCV Signal, Savannah, reporting live for the election season. So nervous when I interviewed different officials that I was like, we're here with Steve. Yeah, I've done that. I don't remember your last name. I know we were just talking about it for, I totally get that. And
I had to interview Steve Knight when he was still representing Santa Clarita.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, don't go by my title, just call me Steve. And I was like, okay, well, we're here with Steve. And I'm like, what are you hoping to see in the polls? And he's like, well, I'm hoping to win.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite story about that, when you kind of have a guest leave you hanging a little bit. This was not live, but actually it would have been funnier if it was. So after Pope John Paul II died, there is a process in the Catholic Church where you have 9 days of mourning. And the Catholic Church is steeped with tradition and ritual. So I thought that after this papal expert that I was talking with had gone through all this detail, about the burial, or not the burial, but the preparation of the body, lying in state at the Vatican, and all these things. Great detail. So I asked him. Sophia, I want you to play the part of you'll be me and I'll be the papal expert. Okay. You're going to ask me what happens during that 9-day mourning period, and I will play the part of this papal expert. Please go ahead.
So what happens during that 9-day mourning period?
We mourn. That was it.
Did you laugh?
Oh, of course. I was like, oh, okay. All right. I thought it'd be more detailed than that. He said, no, we just mourn. And I said, and then my follow-up was, okay, well, what happens next? but I still, to this day, I can text my old managing editor at that station, and I could just say, we mourn. And that's like the introduction to our conversation. But, yeah, you just go with it. I still get nervous. Like I interviewed Congressman Mike Garcia, who also represents Santa Clarita. I interviewed him a few weeks ago for the podcast. I got nervous because I don't interview politicians all that much, and these are people with power, and I still get nervous around people with power. You know, I've never talked to this guy before, and it turns out that he was more of a fan of me. Not necessarily nervous to talk to me, but all the years that I spent on the radio, he knows who I am, and so it was fine. I didn't need to be nervous. What do I care? What do I care if the interview, you know, if he doesn't like my questions or whatever? So it just takes practice, and it also just takes with practice comes confidence, and with confidence comes experience, and all the other things. No earthquakes. You're right. Yeah, Andre, whenever I was in Florida, I was talking about the hurricanes. They're like, what's it like with earthquakes out there? And I was like, I'd rather have earthquakes than a hurricane because at least, you know, you don't have a week of anxiety leading up to the earthquake and then a week of recovery, or then the earthquake lasts 2 or 3 days. And then you have a week or two of recovery from the earthquake. Obviously, sometimes, you know, much longer than that. The earthquake, you don't know when it's coming. It just happens, and then you're done with it, and you move on. You recover if you need to recover. But yeah, there's no earthquake season here, like there is in Florida with with hurricanes. Yeah, no, because I was seeing I don't know. We were watching Uncut Gems. I can't watch Uncut Gems is Adam Sandler. I can't watch that. I've heard it is just 2 hours of anxiety as you wait for this guy to.
Yeah, I was in
implode.
reference to all the good gems or
Oh,
quotes.
thank you, man.
Yeah, no, I was really when you were talking about just the idea of perfection getting in the way of you actually improving and just getting better. I kind of that's like personal for me because I typically kind of try to do that. Like, well, if I'm not perfect, then why bother? But yeah, just getting your perspective on someone who's had experience in radio for so long, and just knowing that you also kind of feel the same way. It was just very comforting in a way. So I appreciate that.
No, I thank you for saying that, and it really just came from years of beating myself up for not being perfect. I would say, let's say I've done 10,000 newscasts. Let's just throw that out there because that's probably about right. I could probably count on 2 hands the number of absolutely perfect newscasts. There was always a stutter. There was always a start and stop. There was always, you know, an audio misfire, you know, and I count against it like it's supposed to be a 4-minute newscast, but it went 4:15. I almost said 4:20, but I'm in a room of college kids, so I don't want to get you all distracted. But Andre's like, I feel attacked. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I count all that. You know, I count all of those things. And for years and years and years, seriously, these headphones, these are my favorite headphones, okay? They're $20 headphones you buy off Amazon. I like the ones that sit on my ear because my ears are huge, you know? So I don't like the ones that sit over the ear because then but either way, the reason I fell in love with these is because I have thrown and broken so many of them after a mistake-filled newscast. And at some point, I don't know, maybe it just clicked or whatever. The idea that I don't need to be perfect every time to be successful. You know, I used to say, and I kind of got away from this saying for many years, but like, without failure there is no success, and without struggle there's no success. And if you expect so much of yourself to be perfect, then you're never going to allow yourself to be great. Ooh, wow, another one.
Wow.
Are you sure you don't want
Another
to be a
one.
rapper? You're spitting bars. Just put it
Oh,
in.
yes. I want. I totally want to just write all these things down. This, you know what it was? I took a nap before tonight's Zoom.
He's
You
like,
can
I'm
find us
good.
on our
Let's
website.
do this.
Oh yeah. So I wanted to ask, how many of you had meetings with Sinclair this week, or the last week? And you had that, I think, around the same day that they laid off like 500 people or whatever it was. How'd that all go?
It was the day of that they did that.
Yeah, I got off of my meeting with Kevin Olivas, and then I saw that they had like security escort people out of the building.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I don't think I really like Sinclair anymore. That's kind of messed up.
Every station does it though. That's just
They
it.
use security to escort people out.
It depends on who it is. You know,
They did it with every single person.
Well, yeah, it's rough. But most companies, if there is a mass layoff, something like that, they'll have plans in place. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. Christy Smith, like one of your stories the other day, kind of freaked out. Oh yeah. Perfection has kept me from launching about 5 to 6 episodes that I've just been editing. So Jesse, I'm the same way. I had, up until 2 weeks ago, I had 8 episodes just sitting in the bank. And I finally was emotionally ready to A, listen to all of them, and B, be okay with whatever happened. You know, I know this is a journalism club and talk and chat, but I've reached the point, especially the last year and a half of my life, and losing my wife last year, and you know, I really have gotten to the point where I just do what I can do, and I give the rest to God. And you could call it a higher power, you can call it what you want, whatever is going on in your life, because I spent a lot of years, and this goes back to, Andre, what you were talking about, the idea of perfection. It goes back to you want to control all the different outcomes of what you do. And the only one you can control is what you do and how you react. So just put the content out there. How people react, that's up to them. You know, how people consume it, how people listen to it, what they do with it, that's up to them. You know, that's beyond your control. You just got to kind of let go of that and just create the content that makes you happy, create the content that you're passionate about, and just let the world deal with it however they want to deal with it. Let God handle whatever he's going to do. The idea also that so I put out those 3 episodes, and then I'm sitting on 5 more, and I'm like, God, I just don't want to edit these. Because I know I'm going to want to take that part out, but then I don't want to take that part out, this and that. And my guests will ask me, like, how much of this is you're going to leave in? I'm like, 99% of it. I just leave it in. The only thing that I take out to a large degree, and it goes back to something we talked about earlier, is because I don't have questions written down, a lot of times a guest will stop talking and I may not necessarily have the next question formed. So I'll start to ask it, and my mind will be like, dude, the way you're asking that sucks. Start again. And so I'll start again. And I'll tell them straight up, like, the only thing I usually take out is my starts and stops, because I'll start to ask a question. It doesn't sound very good, so I'll start it over so that it's all easier in the editing process. But I'm not taking anything out that changes the meaning of our of our conversation. Savannah, what's up?
I have a question that's kind of like, I guess, I don't know, it's like a general question. So something that I've noticed, this is super random and I'm not trying to be creepy. I've noticed that you have a tattoo and I have one too on my arm. And so my question or concern that I've had for a while is how do they feel about having tattoos, especially if you're on TV? Because that's been something I've been kind of worried about.
It really depends on the newsroom.
Thing where it's like weirdness about having tattoos. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the newsroom. It depends on the market, I think, also. If this was 10 years ago, I would say, oh, good luck with that. Just try to cover it up. Not necessarily with like makeup or anything like that, but just always wear long sleeves or sleeves enough to cover it. Anymore, it's a lot more accepted, of course, that you have a tattoo. But I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. And I would probably include one or two shots in your reel where you do show it. And honestly, the next opportunity that you have to talk with a news director, somebody in a position to hire you, ask them straight up, like, "Hey, I've got this tattoo. Is that a big deal? Like, what do you think? So like, yeah, this right here. So that's my microphone and headphones. I got that live on the air at KFI while doing the news.
You
That's
did?
so dope.
Yeah.
That's sick.
That's like the best story ever.
So I got that one. And
That's awesome. That's
so
super fun.
this is, and I didn't design it. This is literally just Microsoft clip art. But it when I was looking for headphones and microphone, it was like, oh, well, that's the one. Who cares where it came from? But we did a fundraiser every fall, and part of the fundraiser that I basically the last few years that I was there, it was like, hey, come get a tattoo with Bender in studio. And so I first got this tattoo here, this one. And then this one this is Marin, M-A-R-I-N. And then
You're leaning away from your mic.
We can't hear you.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Your daughter, that's cute.
Yeah, so that's Marin here.
His daughter, Marin.
And then this is Wiley.
Wiley.
Over there.
That's what I'm getting from it.
I love that.
God, I'm going to flip my video.
I don't know what he just said. Something about video.
I was going to flip my video, but I can't. I can't flip the video. But yeah, so the M in Marin shares is also the W in Wiley is basically how that turned out. That one I did design. It's the only artistic piece of art or whatever, visual art that I've ever created. But also in studio.
Jesse, go ahead.
Yes, Jesse, what's
Cool. So no pressure on this question. I like your vibe. I haven't met you before this.
Yes.
But I love how you are, like with your podcast voice.
Thank you, man.
Would you want to be on mine, or will we talk about that after? How do we plan that? Because
when do you graduate?
I graduate next spring.
Next spring. All right. So, generally speaking, I don't get involved in students' content.
Technically, so just letting you know, Jesse is not a broadcast journalism major. He is a PR major, so he would never take your class. So technically, he wouldn't be your student.
All right. I'll have to think on that.
Okay,
but,
cool.
But
way to save it.
Yeah. But if I can't or don't do it now, I would absolutely love to come on after you graduate.
Nice. Sounds good.
So the answer is yes, either sooner or later or both.
So you're on my list. Cool.
I appreciate that, man.
No, thank you.
Yeah, you know what? Create a guest wish list. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Does anybody know on TikTok Angry Reactions?
Yes.
Yes. I have already emailed him once asking him to come on my podcast because
nice.
Just shoot your shot.
Yeah.
Let them tell you no. Let them tell you no.
Did you? Well, you know what? Actually, Lisa Remillard, who I had last semester, she's huge on TikTok, and I have been such a big fan of her. And I literally reached out to her on Instagram.
Is she above 1 million followers now?
She's like 3 million or
She's
something.
no.
Yeah,
Wow. Because I think when you I want to say when you had her on, she was only like 900,000 followers or something, right?
She's got 937.8K.
Okay. Okay.
Almost.
Sorry.
So her videos have millions of views. That might be.
Oh yeah, that's
that
probably
might
what
be
I'm
it.
thinking of. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but she's shooting my shot. Talk about shooting my shot. That she's gonna. I'm gonna send her an email. I've been meaning to send her an email. I'm friends with her co-host Carlos Amesqua.
Who is this?
And
yeah.
and I worked with his son-in-law for many years, and had Carlos on my podcast, the old podcast last year after the pandemic. Yeah. So just shoot your shot. Create a wish list.
You were our teacher.
Yes. I'd be like, okay, you've talked to my students. Now you talk to me.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions before I kind of end the meeting? I know you're taking care of your daughters, and I don't want to keep you, and you're probably hungry.
I told them to just play on the roof. They're fine.
Oh.
They're fine.
You know what? That's a good That's a good one. I'm gonna have to think about that next time I'm babysitting.
Right. No, exactly.
Wait. I have an important question.
Yes.
Hey, all of the artwork that your daughter did last semester, is it still up?
Yeah, no, I've moved it up here. And I actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I took one of it here, virtual background. So for one of my first classes, I tried to figure out how to change it, not change it, but like tile it and everything here. It didn't turn out well because the way that I was sitting, because I just kind of threw it together on the fly. So I have 395C, right? And then I had KCSN. Well, the way that I designed it, not realizing that I would be sitting in the middle of it, it just looked KK, 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 KK. So I'm like, not going to use that, right? We're just going to have to crudely put a bunch of 395Cs up there. But yeah, no, it's up here. It's up here with me. I'm in my, when you had me for class last semester, I was still downstairs in the office and our classroom, but, the schedule that I had last semester for teaching lent itself to doing that because I had classes after they were done with school. But my classes this semester, I have one of them that's at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I can't teach there. So I've moved everything up. I'm in my wife's walk-in closet. Yeah. So it's now studio, office. I call it Studio C for closet. So it's studio, it's office, it's classroom, and it's storage. Yeah. I have a bunch of games and things up here too. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time tonight. Andre, do you want to say a couple words before we go?
Yeah, just thank you again. This was very and it was a great meeting. Thank you so much. It was great to meet you, and I look forward to hopefully taking a class with you sometime soon. But thank you again. All your advice was definitely needed, and it just thank you again.
I do want to find out. So I obviously I know Gina and Savannah and Sophia. Now I know that Jesse's a PR major.